To fill in the blanks because I had an impression that the service would be a little bit longer this morning, and that's all right. Don't be alarmed that I have about 18 minutes. Actually, this is working out well. For the other day in a staff meeting at our devotional time at South Niagara Life Center, and one of our congregation works there, we got into a discussion and I talked about preaching for 20 minutes. He said, "You've never preached just for 20 minutes in your life." So I want to help Tom this morning to go back with a good report on Tuesday that it can be done. He's shaking his head, and you believe it can be done. All right, very good. That's good, Tom. That's good. Well, this morning I want to talk to you about a problem that has existed since the fall of humankind, and it's actually a story from the Old Testament, from our series on the book of Genesis, and this comes from the 11th chapter of the book of Genesis. I want to read the first 9 verses to you. If you have your NIV, it's going to read somewhat differently this morning. On the screen, you'll find these words. It's actually from the New Living Translation. Let me read that in your hearing this morning. At one time, all the people of the world spoke the same language and used the same words. As the people migrated to the east, they found a plain in the land of Babylonia and settled there. They began saying to each other, "Let's make bricks and harden them with fire." In this region, bricks were used instead of stone, and tar was used for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky. This will make us famous and keep us from being scattered all over the world." But the Lord came down to look at the city, and where is that? You know, these lines have jiggled together here. The Lord came down to look at the city and the tower and the people were building. "Look, the people are united. They all speak the same language. After this, nothing they set out to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse the people with different languages. Then they won't be able to understand each other." In that way, the Lord scattered them all over the world, and they stopped building the city. This is why the city was called Babel, because that is where the Lord confused the people with different languages. In this way, he scattered them all over the world. I want to talk to you very briefly this morning about a pride problem that has existed ever since the fall of creation. Kind of reminds me of the little boy who was a great avid baseball player, wanted to be a baseball player, and as he's walking out in his backyard, he's got a big backyard, he's got a bat in his hand, he's got a glove in the hand, he's got a ball, and he's tossing the ball up in the air, and he takes a swing of the bat, and he misses the ball. "I'm the greatest batter in the world." He throws it up again, making sure he's going to connect this time, and he swings through that. He misses the ball. "I'm the greatest ball player in the world." He throws it up again, and once again he misses the ball. "I'm the greatest pitcher in all the world." Well, we have a way of kind of revamping things and slanting them to our own way of thinking. And this is the problem with what happened in this story this morning, the Tower of Babel or Babel, whatever word you use. And so we're going to look at secular humanism this morning that began at Babel. You say, well, would you define secular humanism for me, or humanism at least? It is a secular philosophy that espouses that reason, ethics, and justice, and specifically rejects the supernatural and religious beliefs as the basis for morality and decision-making. In other words, you don't need God, you don't need the Bible, you don't need all these things. All you've got to do is look on the inside of yourselves, and you're going to find the answer to life's stresses and problems. But there are issues there that are grossly out of whack. And so you're filling the blanks this morning. Let's quickly look at it from this passage. These people had a desire to build a tower that would reach up into the heaven. That's the first thing, whose top would reach up into the heaven. Pride will affect our worship. Pride always affects our worship. This tower was a ziggurat with runaway stairs that would go up to the edge of the top, around the top. At the top of these towers were commonly used in ruins of that era and that time. There was an altar. They used the altar for pagan worship. And so here in the first mode of thinking is a wrong philosophy. Pride always affects our worship. It affects our worship when we try to impress God or others with our own goodness, our own morality, our own way of thinking. I cannot worship God with a spirit of pride. Psalm 101, verse 5. If you're taking notes, Psalm 101, verse 5. Number 2, pride will affect our view of life. They said not only will we build this ziggurat or this tower that's going to reach up into heaven, let us make a name for ourselves. Pride will affect our view of life. Every person who's ever attempted to be a world leader has been defeated. And you could go over a host of names, from Nimrod, who was the builder of this place called Shinar, and we'll talk more about him in a moment. From Nimrod to Nebuchadnezzar, to Hitler, to Stalin, and even the Antichrist that's coming in the future. All of these people are destined for destruction when they have an idea to make a name for themselves. And that goes back to heaven itself, where Satan desired to have a name for himself and rise above God's name. And we sang about God's name this morning. When we ignore the impression of the Holy Spirit, when he convicts us of sin, when we ignore those things that God tries to warn us and show us, trying to give us direction, and we decide to go our own way, we take the way of the humanist. We take credit for things that we shouldn't. It's like the beaver who told the rabbit as they stared up in the immense wall of Hoover Dam, "No, I didn't actually build it myself, but it was based on a good idea of my own." And we are so prone to take those things as if somehow we are responsible for it. So pride will affect our worship. Pride affects our view of life. And thirdly, pride will result in the very thing we want to avoid. Isn't it interesting? They had a fear they would not be known. And so they said, let's build ourselves a city here. Let's build ourselves a tower that's going to reach up into the heavens. We're going to make ourselves known. And we don't want to be scattered all over the earth. That was their fear. Man's pride will bring him low, but honor will uphold the humble in spirit. Proverbs 29:23. Write that down in your notes if you would. Proverbs 29:23. A man's pride always brings him low. But the direct opposite to that, in James 4:10, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. These people had 3 invitations of pride. Let's make ourselves brick. Let's make a city. Let's make a name for ourselves. Cities meant security. It meant importance. It meant power. But you see, the whole thing is off base because they don't understand that to have a name for yourself and to have that kind of an aspiration is to seek God and his kingdom, as we heard about this morning. Seek God with all of our heart, and then we truly find greatness. Towers were religious symbols. They were to honor the gods. The tower was man's effort to try and reach God. We talked about that last Sunday. Here we are again, the same kind of attitude. These people had an idea. If we could just build this big tower, we could reach right up into God's presence, and we could get right up there. Isn't it interesting that we haven't learned all that much over the last 6,000 years of history? People are still trying to get to God on the basis of their own morality, their own way of thinking. This was the issue. Let's make a city. Let's make a tower. Let's show off our importance, our status. Let's show off our religious devotion. Let's make a name for ourselves. Let's get popular. Let's be known in the community. Let us be like the shining stars of Shinar or Babylonia. They did not realize that God wanted them to humble themselves, and God would exalt them in his own time and in his own way. As I've already mentioned here a moment ago, the founder of this place was called Nimrod. He was a hunter. Chapter 10, verses 8 through 12, we read about Nimrod. He was a king of Shinar. He was a ruthless conqueror of the ancient day with ambition, political aspirations. And a man named Wilmington says this about him: Nimrod's name actually means let us revolt. He was a man who revolted. To leave the Lord out of our lives, ladies and gentlemen, is actually to live in revolt and rebellion against God. The problem with the story of Babel here, the Tower of Babel, is these people are living in revolt against God.